Hello, and welcome to the 4th Annual Greywater Showcase for WaterWise Davis. My name is Erin Reddy, and I am the Campaign Manager for Cool Davis. All participants are muted by default. If you have questions about technical problems, please use the chat feature. If you have a question for one of our panelists, please use the Q&A feature. And when we have designated time for discussion, please use the option to raise your virtual hand if you'd like to speak. Our theme this year is the connection between Greywater and growing your own healthy food. Our format today will include opening remarks from our special guest, Nina Gordon-Kirsch of Backyard Permaculture Guild and Greywater Action, an update on city water resources and conservation from City of Davis Conservation Coordinator Don Cascano, a presentation of Greywater basics from Leslie Crenna of Eco Assistant, and then a panel with Nina as well as UCD Assistant Professor Catherine Brinkley. We will conclude with a raffle. May I now introduce our special guest, Nina Gordon-Kirsch, who will provide the opening remarks on growing healthy food using Greywater as a resiliency strategy during the pandemic and into the future. Nina will speak about her experiences regenerating backyard landscapes for ecological well-being, food production, drought tolerance, and beauty. In particular, with veggie gardens, Greywater systems, natural building, native plants, fruit trees, chickens, and more. Nina, take it away.
Hi everybody, Erin, thank you so much for welcoming us here and for that introduction. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for inviting me. I am going, in my opening right now, I'm going to talk a little bit more just about water and why Greywater is important. And then later this evening when I'm on the panel, I'll go more in depth about what Erin was talking about in terms of growing healthy foods with Greywater and what you can do in your own backyard. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started with a presentation. All right. So this is my backyard, just sharing a little photo of what I get to be with every day. And when I moved into this house 5 years ago, there was only a lemon tree here. Everything else we created with our hands and our imagination and hard work. And you can do that too. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. Before we get started, I just want to recognize that I'm currently zooming in from Oakland, which is historically Chochenyo and Ohlone land, and this land has been taken from those people. And in Davis, I understand that historically the land belongs to the Patwin people, and I just want to name that that we are standing on stolen land. And then to give ourselves a little bit of dropping into where we are in the water world, right now I'm currently in the Temescal Creek watershed. And I also learned that part of Davis is in the Putah Creek watershed. And I like to bring this up at the beginning of any educational piece I do around water, because when I think about watersheds, it gives more of a view of where we are in our own watershed. The Temescal Creek watershed has different neighbors of watersheds, and there's certain plants and animals that go along with living in certain watersheds. So instead of just knowing that I live in a city called Oakland, Temescal Creek brings more of the natural history in. So similar to the Putah Creek watershed, if that's something you all are interested in learning more about, you can learn about the birds and the animals and the climate and all of that affects that particular watershed. So right now I'm just going to go into more about why Greywater is important, and then we'll get to the veggies a little bit later. So here's a little drawing. Where do we get our water from? there's like water happening somewhere. There's a whole blank box that I don't have any information on, but I open my tap and I get a glass of water and I'm so happy about it. So why is there a big blank box, right? Like, why did I go my whole life up until I started asking more questions without being taught what's in that box? And thank you all for tuning in today, because you're going to get to fill in some of that box, both from what I have to say and what Leslie will speak on pretty soon. So part of that box is learning where potable water comes from, where fresh water that we actually drink comes from. And this graphic you might have remember from 3rd grade or 4th grade science, back when we were learning about different water types. And look at that. Out of the earth, 97% is ocean water, and then only 3% is fresh water, is not salt water. And in that 3%, most of it is held in glaciers, which is inaccessible to us to drink right now. A lot of what's left is underground in aquifers, and a teeny tiny portion is in rivers and lakes. That's less than 1% of Earth's water is accessible fresh water, like water that we can actually drink, water that could come to our taps and be delivered to us to drink. So there's also wells, rivers, lakes, rain. Those are some of like the common ways that we get water. And just to reiterate the fact that it's a teeny, teeny, tiny portion of all of the water that exists on this planet. And we get the honor to receive that water into our homes, into our lives, into our garden hose. And it's really a choice of what we do with our water next to be a part of this water system, this water cycle. So I live in Oakland, and I'm sorry this is geographically off topic, and I'd be curious to hear about in Davis where your wastewater goes. But for us here in Oakland, all of our wastewater gets collected and goes to a treatment facility, which is right near the bay. And then it gets put into the bay, which then flows out into the ocean, and that is a saltwater source. It's not a freshwater source. So pretty much we are being delivered this beautiful freshwater that's less than 1% of the water that's on the planet. We're using it in our homes, flushing the toilet, showering. It's going to our sewer and then being treated and then being put into a saltwater source. And that means that that less than 1% of water that's fresh, we're contributing to adding that fresh water into salt water. And now naturally that would happen anyway without infrastructure such as sewage and treatment, because rivers would flow into the ocean. It's a natural system, but the extent that we are doing it is much higher than would happen in a natural system. In a natural system, water would spread and sink down into the earth and refill aquifers and be in marshlands and grasslands and percolate out into soil. So we're piping and paving and moving fresh water into the ocean. So what happens other places around the world? Well, in Israel, 90% of wastewater is actually reclaimed. They reuse 90% of their wastewater, mostly for irrigation of agriculture, and then also for industry. And that's amazing. They're not putting that water back into the saltwater source. They're actually reusing it in their culture, in their society. And following Israel's footsteps, Spain reuses about 20%, Australia and Turkey are up there maybe in the 10 and 15% area, and California, we reuse less than 1% of our wastewater. Our wastewater is either going to the ocean or that very small percentage is being treated and reused on site or put back into the ground. It's not being used for agriculture yet, although we're on the path to doing that. So I want to take a look at precipitation from this past winter in comparison to other years, to also just show why it's so important to reuse water and on-site like grey water systems. So here's a graph of historic precipitation, so that you know where we are currently, or this was actually from May, but it was the end of the rainy season. This is where we're at in the history. So just to get a sense of place, I'm going to note 2014 and 15. This red line was in like the worst part of the drought. And we in May we were below that, where our precipitation this year did not even reach the amount that we got in the lowest part of the drought. Up here, that really wet year, 2016 to 2017, you remember that one? So here, that's a big water years all the way up here. And then we'll go to the average out of the years of data, and it's still above where we're at today. We're below average right now. And so I just like, we've had some huge rain. Like I still remember 2016, 2017, I couldn't get over Tioga Pass until like after 4th of July weekend. Something, you know, ridiculous. Snowpack was huge. There was so much water, rivers were flowing. And I still feel that, like I remember that. And I also wanna make sure that we calibrate to where we are today and not just like rest on previous years of a lot of water, and realize that we don't have much in the glaciers this year. We don't have that, I mean, in the snowpack this year. There's not a ton of snowpack, and it's gonna affect our water sources downstream from that. So just wanting to make sure we understand where our fresh water comes from, so that when it arrives in our home, we can actually be grateful for it and realize what a journey it took to arrive here, and what an honor it is to think about how we're going to dispose or reuse that water that has arrived to our home from very far away. So
about 1 more minute, Nina.
Yeah, so I'm done, and
okay.
I'm just gonna pass it off now to Leslie, I think I'll pass it off to Leslie, who's going to talk about Greywater and get you more on board with what I was talking about. What are smart ways that you can reuse Greywater at home? How do you assess if your house is a good fit for a Greywater system? And without further ado, I'll pass it off to Leslie.
All right, well, actually, before we go to Leslie, we've got Dawn speaking. So thank you, Nina. Dawn is from the Environmental Resources Division, and she'll be speaking on the status of water resources and conservation in Davis. Dawn's primary focus is on water conservation, although she assists with other environmental resources programs. Prior to working for the City of Davis, Dawn worked as a water conservation coordinator for the City of Woodland. All right. Are you ready, Dawn?
Yes, I am. Can you see my screen?
Go right ahead.
Okay. So it's going to give some brief water updates for the City of Davis. And thank you, Nina. That was a perfect lead in. It's been a very dry year so far, and that's something I discussed also. Just some general water updates, a lot of text on the screen. You can kind of read through that. I'll go through the highlights. But access to surface water is restricted this year. It's what they call Term 91 conditions. It's when the state restricts water that would go to the Delta watershed. This just means that there's less water that we can divert from our surface water source for the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency. This often happens in summer months, and it is planned for when the water agency was looking at water needs. This was built into it, that they knew there would be these Term 91 curtailments the majority of years. What this does mean, the surface water restrictions, that we are relying more heavily on our groundwater sources, especially during the summer months when we have the higher irrigation use, and that's where Greywater could really, play in and reduce some of that irrigation use, especially those peak hours that we see in the early morning when people are running their irrigation systems. So it doesn't impact the availability of water for the city. We do have our groundwater resources. We are a conjunctive use system, but we are still encouraging the community. You may have noticed that our parks are a little more brown than usual. They've been doing additional cutbacks on water usage with it throughout the city. So to conserve water whenever possible, especially with outdoor landscapes, and Greywater is a huge step for that. Some additional water updates just to kind of make people aware of. The 2019 water quality report is now available online. So if you have any questions on kind of what's in our water, where does it come from, that's a great report to look at. As in past years, the city's drinking water does meet all federal and state standards. So we do have, clear drinking water. Water usage, as Nina mentioned, in the spring and summer has increased in comparison to 2019. We had a very wet year last year, very dry year so far this year. A couple of things, we've seen increased indoor water usage, completely expected with shelter in place. There is obviously that need for increased hand washing, sanitation, clothes washing because of the global pandemic. And so all of that is expected and completely understood. It was also a very dry spring. There was no rain at all in February, very little rain in March. Many people noticed that their water usage for March and April this year looked more like May and June because they turned on their irrigation a lot sooner. So we were seeing, our production in those months for the city was much higher than we normally see that time of year. And while we have seen an uptick in water use in recent months, overall our water customers have continued to be conservation minded, as we know people in Davis are, and those ongoing efforts have really made a difference. We haven't seen the drastic increases that we could have seen if people didn't have that ethos. So moving on to a conservation update, and hopefully it's hard. I hope I'm not talking too fast. I tend to speak quickly. So City of Davis
You're
water.
fine, Dawn.
Okay, good. It's hard when there's not an audience to know if you're going too quick for everyone. City of Davis water production was 19% less in 2019 than in 2013. That's our state baseline year. It's what the state used during the drought to compare water usage to. They considered it kind of the last normal year prior to the drought. The city is on target to surpass our current conservation goals. It's our 20% by 2020. And our goal is 172 gallons per capita day. And in 2019, the City of Davis was at 125. There were new long-term legislation, water use efficiency regulations that were released by the state in the spring of 2018. Those moving forward will replace that current 20% by 2020. And although weather patterns may change, we have dry years, we have wet years, we always need to be looking at long-term efficiency because there's always going to be cycles of drought and flooding. And we can't, as Nina was saying, just say we had a wet year last year, okay, we can use whatever we want this year. And Davis is very good about being conservation minded. Summer outreach, we've been focusing on the current dry weather conditions, the ongoing importance of water conservation, and encouraging customers to really look at their irrigation systems to reduce unintentional water waste. Most people have been running their irrigation at night as we encourage them to do, so you don't have evapotranspiration during the day. But that also means you don't always see your system and know what's going on. So we encourage people to maybe take a few minutes during the day, turn your system on, make sure it's all functioning properly and that you don't have something happening with your irrigation that you're unaware of. This is our water conservation tracker. It's just showing our production, so our water production over time, and it'd be interesting to compare it to the graph that Nina had showing the time periods of the precipitation. As you can see, then in 2020, especially in March and April, we had higher water use, particularly in March, than we've seen in than we've seen in other recent years. But in comparison, we've been pretty close to 2018, or in some cases a little bit less for the other months so far. So, and that's a more similar, more precipitation in 2018, but another dry year, 2019, you can see we used quite a bit less. In some cases, we had a very wet spring. We mentioned AquaHawk. It's the city's online customer water use portal. So if people aren't aware of it, it is a tool that is out there to help monitor water usage. Within AquaHawk, you have the ability to set usage alerts. It's one of the primary benefits of the program to hopefully allow users to spot and repair leaks as quickly as possible. Just a reminder though, there are no automatic alerts in AquaHawk. It's more similar to PG&E's system where you have to set your own thresholds in order to receive any alerts through the system. And there's over 4,727 users currently registered as of last week. I mentioned the new water use efficiency standards that are coming up. There were two bills, one through the Senate, one through the Assembly in 2018 that call for the creation of new water use standards that are really looking at an indoor component, an outdoor component, and then a water loss component due to leakage. The state is expected, or they're supposed to adopt these standards by June 30th of 2022, so in another 2 years. And then beginning in 2023, each urban retailer water agency will need to calculate and submit information on these water use objectives. Many details for implementing the new water use requirements are still being determined. The water loss is in a rulemaking process, but that's the farthest one along, and there's still a lot of questions on exactly what these targets will be at the state level. This is just a graphic kind of showing what those targets are. A reminder though about this graphic, this is not per individual, this is agency-wide. So each water agency as a whole has to meet this water use objective, not each individual household for what the state is looking at that level. So indoors, the state's looking for 55 gallons per person per day for indoor water use, and that's multiplied by the total population of your city. And then a target based on outdoor water use, which is still being determined. And then another target based on water loss leaks through the actual water infrastructure, and that is still being determined. So there's still a lot of unknowns, but we are tracking this and participating. City staff are participating in various webinars and trainings and part of the rulemaking process to keep up with what's happening with this legislation. And that's everything that I had for now.
All right, thank you, Dawn. We did have a question come in here via the Q&A, and we do have some time for other questions if they arise, but this question, I'm not sure if you know the answer. How much water does the university use, and will water use go down with lower student number?
That's a good question. I don't know the water use for the university. They are a completely separate system from the city. There's a little bit of water from the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency that goes to UC Davis, about 5% of the total amount. But beyond that, there's no connection with the city, the city water system. Would anticipate that potentially water use could go down with less students being, in classrooms and actually at the university. We've seen the water use stay similar throughout the city, but a lot of that is irrigation use this time of year. So that may not have fluctuated as much. So in the fall, depending on what happens with distance learning, it'll be interesting to see if those numbers change, if not as many students or people are returning to rentals in the area.
All right, we have time for one more question. If anyone has it, they can either type it into the Q&A or raise their virtual hand, and we can coordinate that. I will give just a moment to see if we have another question here. All right, no questions. We shall move on then. Thank you very much, Dawn, for your presentation. Next, we'll have Leslie Crenna, who Nina mentioned will be presenting on the basics of Greywater. And at the Greywater showcase here, Leslie wears her hats for WaterWise Davis and Eco Assistant. She is experienced in a wide range of living lightly strategies, including rainwater catchment, greywater, composting, vermiculture, and sheet mulching for lawn replacement. She led a school-based sustainable community garden in the Sierra foothills before arriving in Davis. She is a certified multiple subjects teacher and a lifelong writer, editor, and family historian. She has participated in trainings with Blue Barrel Systems, the American Rainwater Capture Systems Association, and integrated water design with Greywater. She is a level 2 certified Greywater designer and installer through Greywater Action. Leslie is also communications manager with Cool Davis. Leslie will be talking about water reuse, potential for our community, and the 2 types of systems. Take it away, Leslie. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you, Erin. And thank everyone. I'm really grateful that everyone is, all the participants that we have and all of our speakers today. And I wanted to mention that Nina is also trained with Greywater Action as well. So we're like bonded sisters. Like you can't, that's a bond. You can't break that one. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so like Erin said, I'm going to present on Greywater basics. So I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, just get a little oriented. Okay, so I'm representing Eco Assistant with this presentation, which is a small, actually sole proprietorship that I function here in the Davis area primarily, so very small. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about residential Greywater basics. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what Eco Assistant is, the concept of site-based water management, what kind of potential Greywater poses for Davis, some of the what's and whys of Greywater, the two primary system types, design considerations, and then a little bit of wrap up. So Eco Assistant does site assessments, designs, workshops, and generally consults on saving resources. I know Nina also has her Backyard Permaculture Guild, which does some similar services, but we haven't, we're gonna have to compare notes there soon. And as pretty much Erin has already talked about some of the training and background that I have, Quell was not on that list. That is a training that's offered through the US EPA. So I'm gonna initiate a poll here just to get an idea of who's in the room and what kind of experience you have with Greywater. So I'm gonna launch the poll. And I'm hoping that you will answer the first 4 questions. I'm not sure how the system is grouping them, so please just answer up to 4. So the first question is, do you already have a Greywater system? Please let everyone know. And the second question is, are you interested in getting a Greywater system at your home? And the third question is, are you just curious and you're just still sort of checking things out and seeing what's possible? So the bars are vacillating back and forth. Let's see. The attendees cannot see the answers, so I will read it for you. Looks like we have stabilized. Number 1, do you already have a Greywater system? 84% said no, but 16% said yes. So we've got a lot of people that are still curious. Number 2, are you interested in getting a Greywater system at your home? 74% said yes. Great. And number 3, are you just curious and still investigating the possibilities? And 91% said yes, we're investigating possibilities. Very Davis, right? always doing all the research. So I'm thrilled that you're here to do the research. So it looks like the 4th question didn't come up. We'll have to do that later. I'm going to share the results. Okay, I think I have to stop share results for you to see my screen, but maybe not. Can you see both the poll and the presentation?
I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop share results. Okay, so Greywater knowledge. Let's see if I relaunch polling, what's going to happen. That's interesting. I'm not seeing the second part come through, so we're just going to skip that. But the point of that was to sort of somewhat redundantly, but to find out, you know, what kind of knowledge level do the folks in the room have. And when I do this in real life, that is not always exactly the same level. So, all right, so I'm going to just talk generally about site-based water management. So that's a term that I sort of coined myself. It's not necessarily in wide use, but basically it just means the management of water resources on site at the residential level that's in harmony with the local watershed, like Nina mentioned, as well as existing infrastructure. So what is that existing infrastructure? It's the norm for Davis and it's the norm for most of the world, especially the United States. There's supply water that comes in. It's super energy intensive. It's centralized. And as Dawn mentioned, it's in Davis, it's a mix of groundwater and distant snowmelt. We've had to use more groundwater recently, because of the lack of precipitation. And then, of course, the supply comes in. What happens? And of course, rainwater. And then what happens after that? Well, it either goes to a wastewater treatment plant, where again, very energy intensive process, where solids are removed and water is purified, and the wastewater is infiltrated, or in the case of Oakland, put into the bay. In the case of Davis, it's put out into our wetlands. So we have at least it was until a few years ago. Now we have our new new wastewater treatment plant. And then of course, stormwater, the runoff from the stormwater does go into the wetlands, I believe, south of Davis, or east of Davis. And Dawn can clarify that if anyone's not sure about that, like me, but I'm pretty sure now. So this is a bubble diagram by Laura Allen. She is sort of the wise woman of Greywater, and I highly recommend that you look into her book called Greywater Green Landscape. I'll hold up the cover later. It's the best overview and how-to book there is. It's absolutely fabulous. Again, Greywater Green Landscape by Laura Allen. So she recommends, when you're designing or thinking about Greywater, to sort of group your outdoor area by bubbles and think about your supply from fixtures in the house, and think about rainwater. And so this gives a general idea of what that looks like for a home. So what is Greywater? Particularly, California Code defines Greywater as water that is discharged from clothes washers, that's the laundry, obviously, and showers and tubs and bathroom sinks, which is sometimes referred to as a lavatory. It is not in California defined as kitchen water or dishwasher, which is the same as kitchen. But in other states, kitchen water is acceptable as Greywater, but not in California. There are different types. Light Greywater is what I just described, and the kitchen sink and dishwashers is in other places can be considered heavy or dark Greywater. And then toilet water is considered black water, and that is not Greywater. So what are the advantages? Why is Greywater so great? Well, it offsets potable water use when you're using it either for your landscape or for reuse. That's something we'll talk about later. It'll save you a little bit of money off of your utility bill. It's really great for outdoor irrigation, and it makes shade trees even healthier. And it increases yield for food producing trees. Now, I don't have research on this, but Katie and I should get together on that, see if we can find some. And of course, it improves groundwater recharge, and it reduces the embodied energy consumption involved in delivering supply water. So those are all great benefits. This is sort of the way that this is sort of an analysis of Davis and our water use. This was based on December 2014 and August 2015, when we were still in the drought. And this is a way of determining what percent and actual numbers for use of water in Davis. And as you can see, our winter use, which is considered your indoor use, was 64 gallons in the height of the drought at this time. And after the drought had waned, it went to about 57 gallons per capita per day. So that was great. We were really booking there, and we are, the goal, as Dawn mentioned, is 55 in the future. So we're not currently there. We have spiked up a little bit, again, as Dawn had mentioned. But if you do all the numbers and all these calculations, you find out that there's a huge potential, if we all got on board, to really have a huge water source and a huge ability to offset fresh potable water supply use. So, you know, when you're thinking about Greywater, you want to think, is it right for me in my home, right? So there's a lot of considerations, and I'm going to go through a lot of them in addition to describing the system. So is it right for you? Is the landscape suitable? Is your plumbing accessible? Are your appliance and fixtures near the landscape and exterior walls? And can you afford it? Those are some of the basic top level considerations. It is definitely better suited for large trees or thirsty shrubs. You can definitely grow food with it. This is a super happy apricot tree of one of our other staff members at Cool Davis. This is after Greywater system had been put in, but it should not be used for root crop veggies. So carrots and even strawberries. It's great for fruit trees, obviously. So I'm probably going to have to skip forward a little bit and move a little bit quickly. But these are some of the considerations that you're going to want to think about when, again, if Greywater is right for you. How big is your yard? How much water are you currently using? How important is your landscape? What are the uses? And are there some ways that you can reduce your indoor use before putting in a Greywater system? You also want to really consider your whole landscape. You want to think about having climate appropriate landscaping. You want to think about urban agriculture and growing veggies and healthy growing food, and creating wildlife habitat, rain gardens, and converting spray to drip are all really great general practices to consider. Unfortunately, there are not rebates any longer for turf replacement. That was a super generous rebate, and I did get a question about that before the webinar, and the answer is, unfortunately, there are not rebates currently. So just to launch in here again to the two basic system types, there's laundry to landscape and there's branch drain. So laundry to landscape is one that Nina says she specializes in, and I've certainly had more experience with laundry to landscape. Laundry to landscape uses the washer pump to move the water. And a branch drain system uses gravity to move the Greywater. So that's a lot, that's a more complex system, and the installation can be a little bit trickier. California code requirements, what this first one means is that cross connections are not acceptable with potable water. So just like I said before, the supply water comes in and then the drainage water goes out, and you can't connect, you can't cross those two systems. They have to stay separate. The Greywater cannot run off over your property line into your neighbor's properties. Ponding means that it cannot, it has to infiltrate within 24 hours, so you don't see it on the surface anymore. You don't store Greywater. Again, that's the 24-hour requirement. And again, the root crops, not carrots, not strawberries for the most part, because they will have direct contact with the Greywater if you do that. There's a valve, which is sort of the main equipment that you use, and that has to be readily accessible so that you can flip that valve and send it to the sewer, send the Greywater to the sewer, or send the Greywater to the landscape. And if you discharge into subsurface only 2 inches, then you don't need to treat it. You just literally just send it right out onto your landscape. So this is what the 2 valves look like for branch drain. It's a little bit larger system. And then this is what the valve looks like for a laundry system. And that's the 3-way valve, as I said. And again, you flip it one way and it sends the water to the sewer, and you flip it the other way and it sends the water to the landscape. There are more complex, higher tech systems. I have pretty much stuck with the simple systems, but there are instances where these other systems are useful, and there are large commercial buildings, especially in San Francisco, that are reusing gray waters indoors and actually have district level reuse systems. So it's really exciting. So laundry to landscape in particular is really a simple system. It's often a no-brainer. You really just, you know, on occasion there's reasons or barriers not to do laundry to landscape in your home, but for the most part, it's quite doable. No permit, so you don't have to pay for the permit or get a plan checked or anything like that. You do have to think about using special laundry detergent, but that's actually pretty darn easy. If you are using any kind of salts, bleach, oil, or toxics, you need to send that to the sewer, like oils, like even cooking oil or motor oil or that kind of thing, you know, nasty stuff. And of course, when you get a provider, the costs do range quite a bit, but if you get bold and get Laura's book and want to do it yourself, the cost can be really reasonable. So this is what your washer typically looks like, and there's the standpipe and the hose going into the standpipe and the P-trap. That's what you would expect. But when you have a gray water system, you do something a little bit different. So here's the standpipe. Here's your washer, right, with the pump. You put in your landscape-friendly detergents, and the water flows up to the 3-way valve right here. If it's flipped a certain way, it goes into the standpipe. If it's flipped the other way, it goes out to the landscape. There's an anti-siphon valve here, and then there's a transition to flexible tubing, typically, and distribution lines. And the discharge is into mulch basins that typically ring the plants and are intended to infiltrate into the root zones. And so here's a tree where it's hard to see from here, but the ring is a ring that's all around the tree and not up at the crown, and you know, infiltrating right over this root zone. And you want to put covers over those discharges so that you can find them again. And you want to have a fall so that the roots are not growing into those distribution lines. This is an example of some great brands. This Oasis is at the co-op. Ecos is at almost any grocery store you can imagine. Plant Friendly Products is a pretty much national brand. They have no sodium, and the ingredients on the ingredients list typically say sodium laureth or lauryl sulfate, and that's what you want to avoid. So if you don't find your brand, you're going to be reading some labels. Boron is what's found in those powdered laundry detergents. So you don't want any powdered laundry detergents. It's got to be liquid. And of course, bleach you also want to send to the sewer, and you want your products to be have balanced pH. So there are a lot of design considerations. Concrete walkways can be a problem, but you know, you have to, there's ways to get around that. Davis is super flat for the most part, so slope is usually very much in your favor. The slope should be away from the house. You need to consider the needs of the plants and trees that you're watering, and the Wool Calls database is a great resource for that. You also want to look at the soil type. and which relates to the infiltration rate. We have clay soils in certain places in Davis, and the infiltration rate will be quite slow. So you have to be mindful not to kind of overwhelm your soil and put too much water on clay soils. And you also want to think about the distance from the laundry room to your landscape and the trees and such that you're trying to, and veggies and other great crops that you're trying to grow. Interior, you're thinking about what type of washer it is, how many gallons of water are discharged per load, how many loads you do per week, and if you, what your laundry schedule looks like. Do you do laundry every day, or do you do all your laundry on Saturday? Because that will have an impact on the plants. Certain plants like to have wet roots, and other plants prefer to have a deep water and dry out in between. So your laundry schedule is relevant to that. The California Code has a way of calculating how much, basically a little rule of thumb here for calculating generally predicting how many gallons per day a single person will produce of gray water. But you can use different methods. This is just a simple, quick, easy one. And another nice rule of thumb is that a lot of really popular fruit trees like about 20 gallons of water per week. They can do on less, but that's a nice rule of thumb. So this is what a laundry system looks like. It's a retrofit, obviously. Inside, here's your valve, and here's the distribution, or the part of the line that's going into the standpipe. And here's your anti-siphon, and then here's the part that's going down to the landscape. Same thing over here, basically. And then popping out on the outside, the anti-siphon is actually better when it's on the exterior. And this is actually Catherine's, full disclosure, this is Catherine's laundry room. She had a laundry system done as part of her remodel, and this is what it looked like when the wall was open, and this is what it looked like when it was finished. And I know her presentation has a picture where it's much snazzier looking now than in the very beginning. On the outside, this is one way that it might look, where the rigid pipe is transitioning to this flexible tubing. And this is up in the Sierra foothills. When you have some fall, if you're coming from a second story, you can get a lot more distance out of your system if you've got this head pressure that you've created with the fall. And then the main distribution line, this is what a main distribution line looks like as it's going out into the landscape. And then it's teeing off here and going into a mulch basin with a valve and a valve cover. You don't want to valve every single one of these discharges, but it's okay to control some of them with a valve. And then this was what it looks like when it's all done. Here's your mulch basins full of chips, wood chips. And, it just blends right into your landscape. You can also do perforated tubing, although this is if you bury it under 2 inches of mulch. Certain plants will, and roots will grow into the perforations, so that's something that you need to monitor. But generally the maintenance is quite low for this kind of a system. Okay, so that's the laundry system. This is, then I'm gonna switch over, transition to the branch drain system. Like I said, it's more complex and slightly different. It's the same in that you're getting gray water discharged from your home. It's just different how there's no pump involved. So it's different in terms of what it looks like on the exterior. So at least typically there's no pump involved. So it diverts water from the showers and the bathroom sinks. And just like for the detergent, you need to use landscape friendly shampoos and soaps and cleansers and cleaners that you're using to clean your tub. So we'll get into more detail there. If you have a slab, this is not likely as a retrofit. It's just going to be heroic measures. So that's really important when we get to our raffle. If you live on a slab foundation, chances are you're not a good candidate for certainly a branch drain, but I should correct that. But the raffle is for laundry, parts kit, and consultation. So that's not a problem there for the most part. So more water is actually produced by a branch drain, and it also costs more and requires a permit. So there's a little bit more commitment involved there. So Dr. Bronner's and Aubrey Organics are great brands. You want neutral pH in your brands as well, and bar soaps tend to be very alkaline, so you really are going to need to shift to liquid forms of soaps. And the Skin Deep database is a great place to go. Just type Skin Deep and it'll tell you every chemical composition of every product out there. It's really quite amazing. And to clean your tub or shower, you're going to want to use products that are vinegar-based or other landscape-friendly liquids. That one, I used to have something on there that my friend Johan corrected, so it's not there anymore. So this is just an elevation of what it looks like, a cutaway of what the branch drain looks like from your tub and your lavatory. This is the throughway valve in a crawl space, assumedly, and this is to the landscape, the gray water going out that way. And then this is, if the valve is thrown the other direction, it will go to the sewer, and this is a backwater valve that is also part of the system. And this is what it looks like in a crawl space with an actuator, which is if you don't have a good option, you can also put on basically a little switch that you wire and to this little doohickey on top of the valve, and it will switch it for you when you flip the switch. And this is what a cutaway of what it looks like when you've got that switch, typically in your bathroom. And in this case, it's if you're gonna, if you're gonna wash, you're gonna clean the tub and you're gonna use bleach or any kind of powder cleanser, you're gonna want to switch it so that the water goes to the sewer. So design considerations are very similar to landscape, except that slope is way more critical because the distribution plumbing is rigid and must drop 2%. So, this typically is pretty tricky for DIY. I wouldn't really recommend this for DIY. You really need to get a professional if you're going to do branch drain. You will likely need to trench. As I pointed out, there's quite a few, you need to sort of work with your professional to determine how much water you're going to be producing. So this is what it looks like on the outside. This one is actually not connected up here yet, but here's where, to make it accessible, we just popped it out of the wall. There's another one where the plumbing was already exterior, so that was super easy. And you need to clean out just like you would with any other drainage plumbing. And these are just some pictures of a job actually in Berkeley where the distribution plumbing went out to the backyard. This is some of the what needs to be done with the rigid pipe. You need to level these splitters. And then this is what the second zone looks like with the mulch basins open. So this rigid pipe is splitting off and discharging into these mulch basins. And when it's all finished, this is what it looks like, all filled with wood chip. And zone 3, same basic idea. Some trees here that are about to receive some fabulous gray water. The signage, there needs to be signage on the valves. That's a code requirement, basically telling people which direction is which and what can go where. And professionals should give you an owner's manual so that you know your questions get answered, and it should stay with the home if you leave the home so that subsequent owners know about the system, where it is, and how to operate it. So just to wrap up, generally speaking, the landscape, the needs of the landscape are going to dictate a lot of your system design. Greywater is typically really best for trees or larger landscape features, but it can work very well for growing smaller plants as well. Laundry to landscape is pretty much a no-brainer for the most part, and approachable as a DIY product for handy people. Branch drain is more complex and expensive. And sometimes it's not possible, but you can get a site assessment to determine if you're not sure. And anytime you're remodeling your bathroom, you should up front start inquiring about Greywater and including Greywater in the plans, because that's the time, new construction and remodeling, where it doesn't add a lot of expense. So that is my presentation. Thank you all so much for listening.
Yay. Thank you, Leslie.
Yeah.
So we do have just a little bit of time for discussion. And I'm thinking that if the attendees have any burning questions, they can send us a note in the chat, and it's possible, I believe, to promote them to panelists such that they can speak and not just be typing. So I'll give a moment for that to see if anyone bites. And in the meantime, if folks want to take a little bit of a stretch break, or we also have had quite a number of questions been posed and answered in the Q&A feature of Zoom. So you can peruse those a little bit. And I will just give a few moments to see if anyone who is an attendee and not a panelist would like to comment, or if any of the other panelists would like to comment in the meantime, feel free to say a few words. Oh, we do have some questions coming in the Q&A. Yes, I think someone's excited about stretch break. A comment from Lisa Baker that sure, the 55 per person per day. And Linda Casilla says she would love to see Nina's chickens. So thank you everyone for participating very thoroughly in the Q&A.
I see that John has a question about, or asking about recommended contractors. So I have I put together a resource list that has books and service providers and places to go check things out, and of course Nina's business as well. So if you go to the main blog post on Cool Davis's website for this event, all of that information is there, including a link to a PDF that will come up that will have all service providers, a collection of service providers. And I can paste that into the chat, I guess.
Yeah, Leslie, we have a couple questions coming into the chat as well, or for any of the panelists to comment on here. So Bradley White has asked about community greywater systems. Does anyone have comment on that?
I'm not sure precisely what that means. I do see a precise question that I can answer. And that question is, what is the range that the laundry systems can reach? So that's a critical element that I should definitely point out. Early systems went as far as 100 and it blew out a lot of washer pumps. So 50 feet from the laundry machine is reasonable. 70, 75 is still reasonable. The distance from the laundry machine is a different question from the fact that he's also saying that it's in the middle of the home. When a laundry room is in the middle of the home, it depends on whether you're in if there's a crawl space that's accessible, that's definitely important. If it's a slab and the laundry room is in the middle of the home, then likely you're out of luck. Unless you want to see some ugly pipes go through the adjoining rooms.
And I'll just add on to what Leslie said around range, which is thinking about slope. So if your backyard is uphill from where your laundry machine is, the amount of feet you can push the water is much lower than if your backyard is downhill from where your washing machine is. So you could do 100 feet if your backyard is downhill from where your washing machine is, and therefore you're not putting stress on your washing machine pump.
All right.
Some questions about other cities too, and I just want to say I'll get to those other places.
Okay. And the question from Sandra, I did respond to Sandra in a different about her. She has a question about her water filtration system, and that's a complex question. And I'm not an expert on water filtration systems, but Sandra, I really think your question needs to be answered one-on-one because it's complex and I don't have all the answers at the moment.
All right. So we can continue to have questions come in and perhaps we can answer them as things progress. But for now, I think we will move forward into the panel portion of our evening. So our two panelists are Nina Gordon-Kirsch, who provided our opening remarks, and Dr. Catherine Brinkley. Catherine is a professor at UC Davis in Community and Regional Development. She is a veterinarian and an urban planner. Her research centers on planning healthy food systems around One Health, a concept that considers health shared among humans, animals, and the environment. Her work is used internationally by the United National Food Agriculture Organization, as well as local communities to guide plans and policies. Most recently, she worked in Davis on the Downtown Plan and Community-Driven Food and Economic Development Plan. Catherine will be presenting about her own yard as well as the Gardening and Greywater General Plan app. But first, we'll have a short recap from Nina about garden-grown goodies. Each should take 10 minutes, and then we'll have time for Q&A and discussion. Nina, go ahead.
Hey everybody, I'm back. I'm gonna show you a little bit more about backyard transformation. So let me share my screen again. So just so you get to know me a little bit more and what my background is, this is a picture of my dog Pete and one of my 6 chickens. Her name's Lady. And we're in the backyard. And before I arrived to this backyard, I studied environmental science in my undergrad at the University of Southern California in LA. And it was really interesting to study environment in the city of Los Angeles. And I learned a lot about Los Angeles's water history. And I also learned a lot about, in my biology class, I learned about fish populations off the coast of LA that were turning female completely and not able to reproduce anymore because of what I talked about earlier of wastewater going into the ocean. And studies were showing that birth control pills and residues from estrogens being pumped into the ocean were causing fish populations to completely turn female. So after undergrad, I went to Israel and Palestine, and I studied the fate of endocrine disrupting compounds in wastewater treatment facilities. So I looked at what's happening in the wastewater treatment facilities to break down estrogens and BPA, plastic residues, before they go out into the ocean or being reused, because Israel reuses so much of their wastewater. And then I stayed over there to get my master's degree, studying the cost of wastewater treatment and what's most efficient in terms of filtering out or breaking down endocrine disrupting compounds to be able to reuse water. So that's kind of my background educationally. And then just so you get to know me a little bit better, some fun facts is I love watching the full moon rise. I will go far and wide to catch a good full moon rise on the eastern horizon. And I also truly believe and live my life knowing that small actions times lots of people equals big change, which is why I do Greywater installations at a residential level. I believe that if everyone who has a house that's able to have Greywater system in it, if everyone actually installs it or gets help installing it, we can make a big change in terms of how our water systems work. And not just our water systems, but how the ecology and the microecology of every backyard can function. So I'm one of the co-founders of the Backyard Permaculture Guild, and we are a guild of tradespeople, each skilled in a permaculture niche, and we come together and design backyards and help folks install their backyards. And then, as Leslie talked about, I'm also trained by Greywater Action to be a Greywater installer and educator. And with Greywater Action, before COVID, I used to go to people's backyards and teach outdoor Greywater lessons. And throughout the day, we would install a laundry to landscape system with all of the participants helping us. And this was an amazing hands-on experience, way to learn. And often the people would go home from the workshop. At the workshop, they would exchange phone numbers, and then they would go home and just call each other, and they would help each other install their own Greywater systems. So instead of feeling alone, like they don't know how to do it, and it's a lot of manual labor, they would collectively go to each person's house and install Greywater systems together. So I love that idea of not only teaching how to do it, but then community involvement and community building. So another piece that relates to both of these and COVID right now is planting a pandemic resiliency garden, which is all the rage at the moment. And I'm all for it. Great that it's a rage. Because I believe that making our resources more local and more ingrained in our everyday life is really important for sustainable living long-term. And so just to give some historical context, in 1944, during the war, there was an estimated 20 million victory gardens produced that produced roughly 8 million tons of food, which was the equivalent of more than 40% of all the fresh fruits and vegetables consumed in the US at the time. So this was a big marketing push. The government actually really encouraged people to create victory gardens. There was a whole marketing scheme, like this picture of Rosie the Riveter. There was a bunch of photos like this that went around getting people to plant victory gardens. So there's 40 million acres of lawn in the US currently, and lawn is the largest irrigated crop. So we drench our lawns, and instead we could replace those lawns with edible food gardens. So here, this is part of Backyard Permaculture Guild's work. This is a yard in San Francisco, and we went in and we imagined with the homeowners of what they wanted. And they wanted Greywater, they wanted veggie beds, they wanted fruit trees. And so we helped them install that. And they just sent us a photo during shelter in place of them enjoying their backyard. And they texted us and they said, we're so happy we invested in our backyard because now we're sheltering in place in a beautiful backyard that has pollinator plants and vegetables and fed by Greywater. Similarly, this was my backyard when I moved in, and this is 2 years later. So just in a span of 2 years, a lot can happen in terms of growing your own food. And this is a picture of a Greywater system. You can see the outlets here where the little green tops are and the mulch basins around them. And the Greywater is feeding an apple tree, some blueberry bushes, another apple tree. This is a raspberry bush in the back. You can see a fig tree back here. The Greywater extends into the raspberry bush and back to the fig. And then all along the fence here is blackberry. And this photo was taken in April, just a few months ago. And now, after planting, summer vegetable starts and using the Greywater system throughout the spring and summer, this is what it looks like. There's squash, blackberries, the apple trees blooming, boysenberries over here. This is zucchini, this is delicata squash. So there's a lot going on just to see, like, this is fed by Greywater. And Greywater can grow really amazing food. So as Leslie said, we're not planting any root vegetables here, but it's squashes and apple trees and blackberries, things like that. So it's possible. You could do this and you could have some healthy food growing in your backyard next summer. And I just want to end by saying that there's this piece around belonging. If we know where our food comes from, and if we know where our water comes from, that strengthens our sense of belonging, of where we fit in. We as humans are a part of nature. We're not separate from nature. And when we're involved in actually planting our own food, harvesting our own food, redirecting water, and knowing where all that comes from and goes, that creates resilience. If I can grow my own food and I don't have to go elsewhere for it, then I have those skills by myself right here on the land that I'm tending. And I don't have to rely on external systems. So that's a big piece around growing your own food and using your own Greywater. Is not only is it healthy and convenient and a lovely activity, but it actually increases your sense of belonging and resilience. And I think that's it. Oh, and then the last slide, I'll just say, in terms of sense of belonging, so as I said before, I live in Oakland, and this is the East Bay Mud water supply. We get our water, not like Sacramento locally, we get our water from more than 100 miles away in the foothills of the Sierra. And as a part of increasing my belonging to my water system, I'm going to be backpacking from Oakland along the pipeline and along the McCalmy River up to the headwaters, past the reservoirs, up to the headwaters of the McCalmy River. So if that's something you're interested in Davis, is like, find out where your water comes from. Walk along the Sacramento River. Where is the inlet that brings water to your home? I don't know. I'm curious to see how that relates in Davis. And if you want to follow my journey, you can sign up for my email list, which is bit.ly/Nina Walks, and it has to be all lowercase in order for the link to work. And that's all. So
All right, thanks, Nina.
yeah,
That's a great idea to, figure out where your water comes from. All right, next we have Catherine. Go ahead, Catherine.
All right. For those of you who are also moon chasers but live in Davis, the Levee Road along Puda Creek, you can watch the sunset in the Berryessa Hills, which is magical, and then you can watch the moonrise, and you're on, you're near unlined agricultural drainage ditches, which Yolo County is known for. All right, so let me share my screen here. Let's see how I do that. There. Okay. So the princess dress is not mine. We have children, and because we have children with allergies, we do a lot of laundry. And I just wanted to show you, Leslie set up our system 5 years ago now. You can clearly see the label, which reminds us absent-minded parents which way to turn the handle if we need to run a load with something else. And then I put out the three detergents that we use. One of them, that blue ball, we're experimenting with, but it's a detergentless washing system, which has worked out really well so far. And we're having a fun time playing around with the different detergents. And then this is what that goes out to. So there's a little fig tree, which has struggled, but it's doing better now. The nectarine is very happy. We're on the corner of 8th and A, and we have a lot of plums. So if you want to come by and see the system, you can come by and see the system and eat some plums. We also have pumpkin, and then a hedge of lavender and rosemary. And the drainage ditches will sometimes get full of roots. And so I'll take the chickens out in a little portable coop and have them park them there and let them clean it all out for us. So that's another way that you can incorporate your backyard chickens into your landscape. I wanted to add a little bit of math. So Leslie and Nina and Dawn talked about some of the benefits to the city, some of the benefits individually. Because I'm an urban planning professor, I'm focused on the collective city level. And I know there's been several questions here about why can't the Tahoe area get on the ball with Greywater systems? Or what about Elk Grove? And so I share your frustration, and part of the frustration is that Greywater is not, in many cities across the US, not always a legal use. And one of the ways that cities plan their land use, especially in California, is by writing a general plan. And that general plan in Davis needs to be updated. Right now, our general plan does not mention Greywater. And that general plan is a very important document. It sets land use for the next 10 or 20 years. It touches on everything from traffic to housing. And because we're in California, new development needs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And these calculations are those that are recommended by the California Pollution Control Officers Association, which assumes, and that you've seen these numbers before, there are about 25 gallons generated per residential occupant per day from showers and wash basins, and about 15 from laundry machines. So if you're thinking about Greywater usage, this ends up to be a large number for the city of Davis, with our 60,000 people. And then if you add on to those numbers, the California Energy Commission estimates that that water that you're using for your lawn, where you could have been using Greywater, that water needed to be treated and filtered. And so if you're not doing those treatments and that filtration, you're saving electricity in pumping the water and in treating and cleaning the water. So all in all, these numbers are just rough numbers, but there's a lot of energy savings, which translates to greenhouse gas emission savings. So this is ammunition for any city who's thinking about how to reduce their emissions, to think about Greywater and further permitting Greywater, or making it easier, making it the default step. So I wanted to talk to you about two pieces of community engaged research that I've worked on recently. And the first is the Food and Economic Development Plan in Davis. And this plan talks about food, it talks about food security, it talks about growing our own food, growing our food together. And this was the outgoing Mayor Brett Lee's initiative. And now that we have a new mayor, Gloria Partida, we're continuing to work on this plan and to think about how Davis, with its rich cultural heritage around food and growing food, can continue that. So there's a place for Greywater here, particularly when it's growing edible landscapes. Another piece is this data portal that my research lab released just this month. So I put the address on top, and you can use this to search for any topic. So suppose you are Larry Gunther, who I believe is on here, and you really care about trees and you want to know how any city is planning for trees, you can type in that search term. Or suppose you care about homelessness, whatever it may be. You can type in that search term and pull up every city's in California general plan that mentions that search term, and then see how it mentions it. So I put in the search term Greywater for this, and there were only 20 cities that mentioned Greywater in their general plans. And I went through them and I pulled out some examples. So the first couple of cities that we'll talk about are in Southern California. And I'm pulling these out because if you're wondering why cities in Tahoe or around Tahoe aren't on the ball, it's because there needs to be collective action to push these policies forward and to make sure they get in general plan updates, which mandate land use and set development for the next 10 to 20 years. What I loved about Malibu's general plan is it says the city shall promote the use of greywater systems, not we'll think about it or we'll encourage it, but we will do it. And they make a commitment to adopt a greywater ordinance. The next thing that they promise they'll do is disseminate information to the community about how to install and manage greywater. So that's all centralized through the city portal, which allows streamlining. And then there was a question earlier about community greywater systems. So I would direct you to look at Malibu because in their general plan, they say that they are going to provide water efficiency demonstration gardens using greywater, which is an excellent way to keep talking about greywater systems. And this is something that Davis could do as well in many places. Redlands, this is a city that's comparable in population to Davis. Here they require inclusion of dual plumbing water conservation across multiple sources. So that's for new development. So Davis could decide any new development, we require you to put in extra systems that will allow greywater more easily. Sierra Madre, they say that they're going to incorporate greywater in their zoning, which is the land use planning map. And then they're also going to assess a water impact fee on new residential units, which would mean that if you're using more water, you have to pay a fee to the city for using more water, and a way to get around that would be to have more greywater. So you're making it less expensive, and that's a wonderful incentive. Some cities like Yountville provide rebates or financial incentives for residents and businesses as well to install greywater. And then last, Mill Valley, I think this is a particularly strong part for any city that's passionate about a topic, is that they're going to lead by example. So the city buildings and facilities will have greywater systems, and that can create a pretty powerful message and demonstration products for residential homeowners to then follow suit. So with that, I will open it up for discussion.
All right, thank you, Catherine. So we've had a little bit of activity in our chat room as far as sharing some links to resources. I have a question about the web link to the general plan mapping tool specifically. Do we have a link for that, panelists?
I will provide that.
Okay. And also the planning tool link, I suppose. And I'll give folks who are the attendee participants a little moment here to come up with any other questions they might have for the panelists or discussion items.
I put the link in the chat.
All right, great. So if there's any attendees who particularly would like to speak, please let us know. There is an option where we can allow you to talk and be heard, just like our panelists are being heard now. So give us an indication if you would like to speak, and we can allow you to talk. I'm not seeing anyone raising their hand here. So you can continue to think about your questions if you have any and ask as we continue on. but we're coming to the end of our program here, so thank you. Oh, I think I saw a hand raised. Yes, Soraya. Okay, so I'm going to allow her to speak. I don't know, she's kind of putting her hand up and down here, I think. Soraya, if you'd like to speak, please keep your hand raised. No? Okay. We'll move on then. So thanks to those of you who've stuck here till the end. And now we'll have the raffle. So Leslie, if you would like to explain here how we'll be doing the raffle.
So did all the questions, did everyone's questions get answered? I feel like a lot of questions went by that maybe didn't get answered.
I've been tracking and I think we've got them all. Soraya seems to have her hand raised though, so let me allow her to talk here. All right. Soraya, I see you. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes.
There you are. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, just if you speak a little bit louder.
Yeah, I think, yes, I see. I think this might be a concern to other people that when we use the shower water for greywater irrigation, could you explain a little bit more how this natural system is able to clean up this water for other, not only for detergents, but I think the concern is about pathogens that can go in that water, and talk about maybe the concentration of these patterns and why these systems are reliable and people shouldn't worry about it. I'm also concerned. So if someone can go through those issues. Thank you.
Okay, who'd like to take that?
Thank you, Soraya. Nina, do you want to take that? So, she's
why don't
asking
you
about,
do it? Yeah.
Sorry?
If you want to go for it, that would be great.
Well, I'm not a super expert, but there is a soil health, I'm definitely not an expert on soil health, but there's definitely a soil health aspect that Soraya was asking about, in that greywater has nutrients in it. And if you are careful about what you're putting down your drain and it's not toxic or salt-based, then you are introducing nutrients in the form of skin and other sort of nutrients that are naturally in drainage water, that instead of becoming a burden on the wastewater treatment plant, they are a bonus to the soil, because the soil and the microorganisms in the soil make use of them. And we have a provider in town, Derek Downey of Whole Systems Design, who is very knowledgeable about soil health and soil ecology and chemistry. So if you want more, I can forward you to him, or you can look him up, Whole Systems Design. And then the second part of your question was more about, remind me.
So why we shouldn't be concerned about using water that has been in contact with body and other residuals. It's mostly for the what you mentioned, the organic load and possible pathogens, and why this is okay for fruit trees and not for roots, for root vegetables. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Right, okay, I understand. So there's also bacteria in drainage water that the soil is uniquely designed to transform into nutrient. And again, I'm not an expert. There's an excellent documentary called Symphony of the Soil that I highly recommend, that talks, gives a lot of detail about that process also. Thank you, Soraya.
And one piece I'll just add, and I apologize for the lighting happening on my face right now, but is the piece about the root vegetables is particularly from a public health standpoint in the state of California, which is very, very strict, and is just completely based off of, let's not even go there. We're not even going to do any type of root vegetable with the Greywater system, just because it's like not a part of what health and safety in the state of California wants to be a part of. And there's not actually science right now that proves that there's anything bad happening or that there's any uptake into the vegetables of something bad. It's more of just like, we're not going to go there, health and safety issues. Just giving California Greywater legally is a huge step. That only happened in, I think, 2009, making laundry to landscapes legal. So like, I believe we're going to get there. We're going to be able to use Greywater for more uses in the future. And it's just like a step-by-step process as we get used to it more.
Yeah, and I would add to that it's sort of the foolproof thing, in that if you were to put Greywater on a carrot and a week later eat that carrot, the soil will probably have taken care of it. But if you put Greywater on a carrot and then pick it, immediately afterward, then there might be some bacteria on it. So the code is designed to, be totally foolproof. And yeah, I don't have data or research on that, but I'm sure it's out there. So I see that Bradley asked a question about community Greywater systems. So Bradley, I'm not quite sure what you mean there, unless you are talking or referring to the regional, or pardon me, the district Greywater system that I referred to briefly. If that's what you mean, I can talk a little bit about that and
I'm gonna allow Bradley to talk here.
Yeah, but if he wants to talk, then let's see what he means precisely.
Are you
Hello?
there, Bradley?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, when I mean community Greywater systems, I mean connecting 2 or more residential properties to form a, I guess, one system to irrigate a common area. For example, like the trees along the roadway. I know that's super important for a lot of us. Has anyone have any experience with that? It seems like the way California code is written, it's not really permitted for Greywater to cross property lines, but I don't know if anyone's come across any projects where people are using, I guess, community Greywater systems.
Nina, do you have any knowledge of that?
I don't have any knowledge specifically on the scenario that you're speaking to, but how the code works in the state of California is it's pretty restricted to single family homes and duplexes. Anything larger, like an apartment building or 3 or more dwellings in one location, would need a permit from the city. So I don't actually know if anyone has applied for permits somewhere in order to do that, like a combined Greywater system, if that answers any of that question.
It does. I was just kind of curious about the potential of that. I've heard of community solar gardens. It's kind of like a co-op thing. People invest in a centralized system to distribute that resource. But no, I thank you again for this great Zoom meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
One thought I have around that is it could be legal to combine Greywater systems or do some type of community thing if it's used as research. So especially in Davis, where there's a big research hub, that's one way to get around the code in terms of legalities, is if it's a research project, then there's more possibility.
Absolutely. Catherine, you want to comment on that at all?
Bradley, I hope you push the envelope, because the more people who see it, do it, love it, advocate for it, the more cities will change their codes and their permitting and you know, maybe one day Davis can be a leader in model Greywater ordinances.
Amen. Thanks again.
Yeah. All right, so panelists, we do have another hand raised here. It is Sandra Hamill. I am going to allow her to talk as well. I'm asking Sandra to unmute.
I'm wondering
Almost.
if, am I muted?
There you are.
Can
Go
you
ahead.
hear me? Okay, great. So I put my question in the Q&A also, but my question was, is there any organization, Cool Davis or other organization, you know, it's kind of less of a fringy thing and more of a, you know, extra added service that they can offer to their customers or maybe contractors, you know, so that there's an awareness of it. It seems like the trades people that I know tend to be more of these things as much.
Okay. Could the panelists hear her question, or should we have her try to repeat that?
Yeah, I can respond to that.
Okay.
Yeah, Greywater service providers are few and far between, and Laura Allen is single-handedly trained. I don't know, Nina, if you have any idea how many people she's trained. Hundreds of people she's trained, who are some plumbers, some engineers, and some just folks that are really passionate about it. And I bet Nina and I are in that category. And again, the blog post has a link to a resource page that I put together that has several service providers in Davis, but there aren't enough. And part of this whole webinar effort and Greywater Showcase effort is to really promote the ecology of the service environment, so that there are you have a lot of people to choose from that have different specialties and different experiences in putting these systems in. And plumbers sometimes are involved in doing the work, or it's necessary for them to be involved in doing the work. And I have worked with a few plumbers, but they are busy folks and they charge a lot of money. So there's some barriers there. I have encountered a handyman here in Davis who has experience putting in Greywater systems, who's very reasonable. And there are several service providers if you take a look at that PDF that's on the blog post.
All right, any other questions?
I'll
You
also
have a
just
question?
add,
Oh,
I'll just
go
add
ahead.
to that literally right now during this presentation, Laura Allen is giving a webinar on how to do Greywater installations, and there will be a recording of it. So I'm just gonna put into the chat the place where I believe you can sign up for her to receive the video after it's done. I think it started at 6:30. If you can just hop right into that webinar when we finish now, go for it. She was just talking about what we talked about, and she'll go more into literally showing you how to do the installation at your own home.
Right, and
Wow,
Greywater
great,
Action, Greywater Action is a great website, and this is a picture of her book. Let me see if I can get it to
By your face.
by my
Put
face.
it by your face. There you go.
Good point.
No, we got it with
Got
Nina.
doubles, yes.
Nina's got it.
All right, yours is working, mine is not. So
Can you say something, Nina, so that it highlights you?
Yay! So that's
Yeah,
a
this
great.
is Laura
There you
Allen's book,
There we go.
Greywater Green Landscape. It's a how-to guide. It gives you the step-by-step. It even has a materials list, so you can go take your book to the store, look at your materials list, and get every single item on there.
Excellent.
Nina
All
had
right.
Nina had mentioned earlier where our water source is for Davis. And if you're driving on I-5 from Woodland going towards Sacramento, and you look off to the left-hand side looking north, you'll see the intake structure as you go over the bridge.
Oh, Don, your video's off, by the way. I don't know if you meant for that.
And
I had it earlier because I have a funky connection sometimes.
Okay.
I'm back.
Yay.
Sorry. Yeah,
There you
so
are.
if you want to see where the intake structure is for the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency, if you're going over I-5 from Woodland heading towards Sacramento, you'll see the intake structure off to the left-hand side as you're going over the I-5 bridge. It's kind of like a brown and blue looking structure there. I haven't actually been inside of it, but that's where it's located.
Thank you. And I see Kathy Forkas asked, I can answer two of these questions that haven't been answered. Kathy Forkas asked about keeping water on her property, even if she's not watering specific plants. Is that a worthy goal? And then she also asked approximately how much water does a front load washer use per load? So I think it's a worthy goal to infiltrate water on your property, whether if you are infiltrating water in your property, your plants are benefiting no matter what. So, you know, and it's saving energy and greenhouse gas emissions to not send it to the wastewater treatment plant. So absolutely. And then the other question, how much water does a front load washer use? Well, they vary, but they use a lot less than the top loaders used to use. My rule of thumb is about 18 gallons per load, but I think there are many that are less. They don't tell you in the labeling or the sales materials how much water they use in my experience. So you can actually measure it though. If you get, you know, several 5-gallon buckets, lots, or a garbage can, if you really want to know precisely how much, you can fill up a container and find out. It's a little risky, but
The other thing you could do, Leslie, is you do it in 1 hour, don't run any other water, make a note of which hour it is, and then go check an AquaHawk and see how many gallons was used that hour. And you would know, okay, that was my washing machine. Right, so you might be able to use it to kind of figure it out that way too. Sorry.
Yes, good point. There are many ways to figure it out. The tricky thing is that the newer washers actually adjust to how much is in the load. So that's something to be mindful of, that, you know, you typically always want to run a full load and be mindful of, okay, if this is a full load, how much water is that?
All right. Well, I see one question here. Why save water for washing if one uses otherwise water for irrigation instead? It's from Don Brink. Anyone have a comment on that?
Not sure I understand.
The point is that in the water that you used for washing, instead of running out to be treated, would then go onto your landscape so that you don't use more fresh water that has been treated for your landscape. And I will say too, I teach a study abroad class every year, so we're gone for a full month and we're not washing all the kids' laundry all the time. So we have a drip system also installed, and that's really helpful, especially if we want to get things started, and then once they're established, we can let them go and we can turn it on and off. So that's another option if you need to futz with certain.
All right. Thanks, Catherine. So I don't see any other questions here. I think we're ready to hear about the raffle. Are we ready to switch gears, Leslie? You're muted. You're muted, Leslie.
We are. Thank you,
Okay.
Erin. When you saw me earlier juggling 2 pairs of glasses, it was because I was trying to manage our somewhat jury-rigged system of how to pull the names. And I didn't quite manage to make it work. So But let's try this and see if it works. Erin, I'm thinking we're going to try the hand raising. Do you think that will there's potential?
Yeah, I think that could work.
Okay, great.
Linda has raised her hand already.
Okay. All right, so we are raffling off 2 laundry to landscape parts kits, courtesy of the City of Davis. Thank you very much. The parts are here. The main part, of course, is the valve. Those are the most expensive parts. And then there's some tubing and some fittings. And along with that, a complimentary site assessment from yours truly. Normally, I try to spread it out amongst some of the other service providers, but this year I just went simple. So that's a complimentary visit to your home, hour and a half to look around, see what the potential is, you know, help you with DIY resources if that's what you want to do, and, you know, allow you to make the choice of whether to move forward or not. What we're hoping you're going to do, and this is a tricky thing because your particular home may not be well suited for a laundry system. So what we're hoping is that all this information that you got will help you decide that yes, there is some potential in my home for a laundry system, or no, there really isn't. So, you know, on our system here, if you think that there is reasonable potential for your home to accommodate a laundry landscape system, then please raise your hand. And I guess, Erin, you're going to write the names down of the people who raised their hands and jiggle them up.
Yes, I can do
that. Right, thank you. I printed a list and I attempted to check off the names, but my vision failed me on that task.
All right.
So I see 12, is that right? 12 hands raised, and it's telling you who's who? 5, 6, I see.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I see 12, yes.
Yeah, so Erin's gonna write those down on paper and put them in her pencil, her hat, or her pencil holder, or
well,
whatever.
I'm going to use a random number generator. I think
she's going to get real official. Hey, thanks for all the, I'm going to read some of these comments out while she's playing with that. By the way, I love the women leadership in this webinar topic. Yay for the women. Woohoo! Wonderful workshop. Thank you for presenting. I'm an advocate. I apologize for those folks who I did not, whose questions did not get answered yet, but let's see, let's send you to, who should we send you to? How should we do that if you want questions to be answered? Is everyone willing to chat their emails if somebody wants to do follow-up questions? Is that reasonable?
Anyone can enter that in the chat if they are interested. But I think we have are we having 2
yes,
winners?
there's going to be 2.
Okay. I got another number here. All right. So, congratulations to our first winner, Jen Meets.
Okay.
Yay!
Virtual raffles. And
our second winner is Carla Campbell.
All right. Our Jen and Carla.
Congratulations.
Yay, Carla. All right, so let me put this email for you ladies to email to get you set up, get us going.
All right, so that email is solutions@ecoassistant.net.
Correct. So that's Jean. Is it Jean? No, Jen Metz and Carla Campbell, please send me an email at that, a message at that email and just say subject, I won the raffle. And we'll start a conversation.
We've got your names down.
Woohoo! Yay.
All right.
And Robert I'm not sure why Robert put his email. Was that your hand raising, Robert, or?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. All right. So.
Well, we've reached the end of our evening here. Are there any final comments from the panelists that you'd like to share before we go?
Katie, did you share about your lab, what your lab is doing with the tool, and what the future plans are a little bit?
The future plans are broader than Greywater. It's because the general plan for any city, including the city of Davis, is several hundred pages long. Dawn can attest. It's hard to know what's in those plans, and then it's hard to compare across plans. So we're using it to look at everything from new requirements to incorporate environmental justice so we don't overburden low income and communities of color, and to see how cities are doing that. And we're using it for to look at how cities are planning for air pollution, homelessness, housing, the whole gamut. And it's, tooting my own horn, a very unique database. No state has a database of its city general plans, and we'll add counties by the end of this summer. So it was a huge project to go to each city's website, find each part of the general plan, extract all the text, and then make it searchable on an interface. But it's a wonderful tool for folks who care about policy and advocacy.
Yeah, I'm sure you're going to share that with folks in town. There's probably many, many people that are very, very interested in putting that to use in our process that we're going through right now.
With the general plan updates.
Right,
yes.
Right. So Nina, thank you so very much. We are going to have to get together after this because, like I said, once you go through Greywater Action Training, you're like your sisters. You have to connect. In fact, that's how I connected with Nina. Is the Greywater Action has a listserv. And am I wrong, Nina, that she's opened it up generally, or is it still only limited to trainees?
I think there's one listserv that's people who've gone through the installers training, and then there might be another one that's public.
Okay, so on the Greywater Action website, you'll be able to find both of those.
Yeah, and thank you all so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to learn about Davis and all that you have going on over there. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for the great weather system, Leslie.
All righty, thank you.
Thanks
You're
for
welcome.
attending.
Thank you for all those great plants you showed us.
Congratulations to our winners.
Yay. Yep. All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Chris, you want to unmute and debrief at all?
Are we stop recording here?
Well, I had it on auto record.